Isla Reynolds, a diligent store clerk at the local supermarket, was known for her unassuming demeanor and remarkable work ethic. She had worked tirelessly for months, saving what she could from her modest paycheck to indulge in a dream weekend at the prestigious Crystal Peak ski resort. It was to be a rare escape from her routine, a reward for her persistence and recent promotion. As she arrived at the sprawling resort, Isla's excitement was palpable, though it mingled with a slight nervousness. Her simple, second-hand winter outfit, a pastel blue jacket that had seen better days, a pair of faded ski pants from a thrift store, and worn boots that were sturdy but unfashionable, set her apart in the crowd of affluent guests adorned in the latest designer ski wear. Despite this, Isla tried to carry herself with confidence, clutching her well-used backpack tightly. The resort was a dazzling spectacle of luxury. A sheen of fresh snow glistened under the sun, the inviting aroma of melting chocolate wafted from a nearby chalet, and graciously uniformed staff members attended to every need. But Isla's joy was clouded by a growing sense of not belonging. Approaching the rental counter to collect her ski gear, Isla's anticipation crumbled when the resort manager, a tall woman whose clothes screamed elegance and exclusivity, derisively glanced at Isla's attire. Her voice cut through the murmur of the lodge, dripping with disdain. "Do you need a map to find the charity shop? This isn't the place for hand-me-downs." A ripple of laughter passed among a few guests, while others looked away, embarrassed. Isla's cheeks flushed a painful crimson in the wake of her public shaming, the resort suddenly feeling cold and unwelcoming. The laughter subsided, leaving a quiet tension in the air as Isla stood frozen, the burn of humiliation creeping up her neck. Here she was, at a place she had dreamt about for months, only to be dismissed as if she didn't belong. Some guests stole glances, their whispers buzzing like pesky insects, oblivious to the sting they added to her already bruised heart. Feeling warmth ebbing away from her, Isla turned, her steps heavy as she exited the rental area. The glossy white snow outside seemed more inviting than the posh confines of the lodge, where appearances trumped all else. She found refuge on a cold wooden bench, brushing off the snow with her sleeve before sitting down. The chill in the air mirrored the numbness spreading inside her. Isla took a deep breath, her eyes wandering over the distant snowy peaks that once promised joy and adventure. Instead, they felt like boundaries, marking the limits of where she could belong. As she sat there, waves of memories began to surface, each crest a reminder of the sacrifices she made to arrive at this moment. Long supermarket shifts loomed large in her mind, the routine stocking of shelves, the incessant beep of the checkout scanner, and the brief pauses when customers asked for advice on their grocery choices. Each task was a building block, slowly constructing her gateway to this dream escape. Her father's comforting voice echoed softly in her mind. He was a man of simple tastes but profound wisdom, who taught her to find joy in the smallest achievements. Since he passed away, life seemed a little dimmer, each day a little longer. The night they had driven past the resort, its illuminated slopes twinkling like stars, she had promised to feel the rush of skiing down them herself one day. This was supposed to be that day. The small raise she had just celebrated was supposed to be a springboard to new possibilities. It seemed fitting to treat herself, something that echoed her father's belief in moments of personal celebration. But here she was, shrouded in the shadow of a manager's spiteful quip, her joy tempered and trivialized by someone who wielded power carelessly. Her reverie was interrupted by an older couple strolling by. The woman's soft, knowing smile and gentle nod of understanding broke through Isla's self-imposed isolation for a moment. It reminded Isla that not everyone was an echo of the icy manager's disdain, that warmth still existed in strangers, and compassion was not entirely lost. She recalled the story she read online about someone who was shamed for their thrift store finds, only to be celebrated after opening a successful fashion line inspired by them. It spoke to her deeply then, as it did now. Simple beginnings did not dictate a simple life. Struggling with the unfairness, Isla allowed herself to feel the hurt fully, not shying away from the sting of public shame. It was easier to brush it off, to run home and forget it ever happened. But deep inside, she didn't want to. There was power in facing the conflict, in acknowledging the pain as real as any other experience in her life. Glancing back at the lodge, she couldn't help but wonder about the choices that led to this. Did the manager hold some secret grudge against strangers who didn't fit her mold of propriety, or was this just another reflection of a world that prized brand labels over human value? The icy air stole a shivering breath from Isla, a sob that she swallowed back before anyone else could catch it. Around her, life continued, children laughing, adventurers calling out to one another, families sharing steaming cups of cocoa. These scenes were what she had imagined being part of, a collective of happiness that was open to all. Her thoughts meandered back to her father, a man whose entire life was spent in service of others, who often said, "There's dignity in every step of the journey." Dignity. That word resonated now more than ever, urging her to hold her head high despite the bruising encounter, to find dignity even in her second-hand coat. But the encounter had left its mark, and as another gust of wind tousled her loose strands of hair, Isla considered her next move. Should she leave and let this experience cloud her spirit, or remain, claiming her small patch of snow amidst the grandeur she had rightfully paid for? Suddenly resolute, Isla stood up from the bench, brushed herself off, and turned her back on the place that had tried to define her by what she wore rather than who she was. The decision to leave was for herself, to preserve the parts of her that seemed fractured moments ago. As she walked towards town, the road beneath her feet crunched rhythmically with the snow, each step a testament to her enduring resilience. The world was wide, and though today felt like one step back, in the broad scheme, she knew she was still moving forward. Her simple act of defiance, her ability to choose when and how to fight for herself, had rekindled a light she thought momentarily extinguished. The sun began its slow descent, painting the snow's surface with strokes of orange and pink, a reminder of beauty even after a storm. Isla wrapped herself tighter in her thrift store jacket, let out a small breath of determination, and headed back towards the village, planning her next steps, not just in boots, but in how she'd reclaim her self-worth regardless of yesterday's clothes or tomorrow's attire. Isla's departure from the resort was measured and deliberate, not the hurried retreat of someone defeated, but a reaffirmation of her will to decide her own path. Each step away from the lodge was purposeful, breaking the invisible shackles of that place's judgment. She was quietly absorbing the sting of her experience, pondering the reality that others had faced similar dismissals, perhaps silently enduring, never daring to speak up. The townscape ahead glimmered with the cheery promise of boutique stores and cozy cafes, but even this bustling scene held its own kind of exclusivity. Isla passed by a cluster of skiers chatting at the bottom of the beginner's slopes, their laughter rich with abandon, taunting her from a distance. Yet she pushed forward, joining the flow of locals along the cobblestone paths still slick from the afternoon snowmelt. About halfway down the path, she decided to veer off into a quieter lane to collect her thoughts. A small service alley between buildings drew her attention, offering a momentary sanctuary from the curious eyes of passers-by. There, she found herself unexpectedly confronted with an alarming sight, a wisp of smoke curling from an electrical box mounted haphazardly alongside a wall near the rear loading bays of the lodge. As she stepped closer, the faint acrid smell deepened, mingling with the crisp mountain air. Her heart thumped with newly unearthed concern. She glanced around, noting the lack of any staff monitoring there. The electrical box appeared neglected and overburdened, wires crisscrossing as if patched together without much forethought. At that moment, two resort employees emerged from a side entrance, their conversation unguarded as they bemoaned the management's choice to ignore a recent electrical inspection. Their voices carried in the silence of the alley, revealing the pressure from above to push issues aside in favor of keeping up appearances. Isla, her innate sense of responsibility kicking in, pulled out her phone, snapping a few photos of the electrical box and the smoke it emitted, documenting the scene carefully. Concerned but not wanting to involve herself directly, she contacted the local fire safety authorities via email, attaching the photos with a succinct note about the potential hazard she had witnessed. Her fingers lingered over the send button, hovering momentarily as doubt flickered across her mind. Was it truly her place? She clicked send, reaffirming her belief in acting when things were clearly amiss, her civic duty supplanting any hesitations. Moving back into the main street, another idea formed: to share her experience at the resort's rental area with someone who might amplify her story. Her thoughts immediately turned to the community blog she frequently read, known for championing fairness and equality, often uncovering similar stories of disparity in the town's overlooked corners. Finding a quiet cafe, she settled near the window, ordering a modest cup of tea for comfort. Summoning her resolve, Isla composed and dispatched her letter to the blog carefully, outlining the incident at the lodge, the dismissive words of the manager, and ending with her observations on the neglected electrical situation. It was a candid expression of not only her experience but a wider call for accountability and respect for all visitors, regardless of their status or attire. Her tea long gone cold, Isla finally left the cafe, her steps more assured now than when she had first departed the resort. There was power in raising one's voice, albeit through written word, and she felt fortified by the prospect that her story might bring about some change. As strange as this newfound role of whistleblower felt to her, she couldn't ignore the truth that stepping forward had sparked a small flame of determination within her. She might be an unsuspecting advocate, but her actions were enveloped in a genuine hope for fairness, a hope that her simple act of speaking up might be a catalyst for bigger changes. Headed towards the lodge to collect her belongings, Isla's mind was already piecing together what she would do next. In the past, when faced with challenges at work or at home, she'd found answers in her father's unwavering belief in facing adversities head-on. Following his example, she wouldn't allow the resort's condescension to define her, much less dictate the conclusion of her weekend. The lodge loomed into view again, the retreating sunlight casting long shadows against its facade. With renewed resolve, Isla took a path around its perimeter, feeling less a victim and more an integral part of a story unfolding beyond her initial comprehension. Down a side path sparsely traveled by other guests, she saw a group of younger skiers struggling with their rented skis. Their laughter, though clueless and carefree, rang with the same spirit Isla longingly held onto, that skiing, against all barriers, should be an invitation for joy extended to everyone. Despite the cold, despite the business's zones of exclusion, she would find her own way to embrace the slopes, perhaps not today but soon. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, she took one last look at the pristine white slopes from afar, doors closing behind her as she braced against the evening chill. The mountain view seemed less daunting now, a realm momentarily out of reach, yet within sight for the next bold-hearted effort she decided to make. Smiling privately at the thought that her simple gesture, her refusal to bow out silently, might ripple beyond her own world, Isla began to fashion her path anew, step by step, immensely aware of the quiet power that dignity and determination granted her. In the days that followed, Isla's account traveled swiftly beyond her immediate circle. The community blog caught fire, readers deeply resonating with her narrative of exclusion and disregard for safety, a tale familiar to many but seldom spoken aloud. The story gained momentum, a clarion call for change reverberating through each corner of the town and beyond. Isla's experience cast a spotlight on Crystal Peak Ski Resort, its sheen of exclusivity now worn and peeling under public scrutiny. Social media platforms buzzed with indignation as the story went viral, echoing across feeds and timelines, gathering voices that amplified the clamor for accountability. People from similar small towns, fringed communities, and neglected walks of life shared their personal stories of being marginalized or ridiculed for not fitting predefined ideals. The resort's management, blindsided by the sudden torrent of public outrage, swiftly moved to contain the situation. Their online presence shifted from one of unyielding luxury to acknowledgement and damage control. An official statement was issued, expressing regret for the incident involving the manager and acknowledging the oversight in addressing safety concerns. A commitment was made to thoroughly examine their practices, with promises of improved inclusivity and heightened safety measures. However, the promise felt insubstantial in the court of public opinion. The grassroots swell of support for Isla burgeoned into a full-fledged movement, prompting local journalists to dig deeper. Their investigative fervor resurfaced other long-standing complaints, uncovering an undercurrent of elitism that rarely saw daylight in an establishment of such repute. Driven by mounting pressure, the local fire department conducted a thorough investigation into the resort's safety compliance, indeed finding the neglected electrical hazards that Isla had reported. The fire hazard was more widespread than initially anticipated, with irregularities spanning several areas utilized by both staff and patrons. Citations were issued demanding immediate rectification, and a temporary partial closure ensued as the repairs got underway. The resort's long-standing veneer of perfection cracked further when the arrogant manager who demeaned Isla during her gear collection was suspended pending a full inquiry. Her behavior, seized upon by news outlets as emblematic of deeper cultural issues, lent her face to a larger narrative about respect versus elitism. While Crystal Peak's owner scrambled to quiet the discord among outraged patrons, many of whom now threatened to boycott the resort, Isla found herself at the heart of an unexpectedly united community. Messages flooded in from friends, family, and strangers alike, a tapestry of solidarity threading throughout the words of encouragement. Her small, courageous decision to stand up was inspiring others to voice their own struggles and contribute to a push for equity in otherwise exclusive spaces. In the midst of this whirlwind, Isla received a handwritten card from an elderly lady, one who saw in her the tenacity she once possessed, for often the strongest changes come from those who dare to speak simplest truths. Thank you, dear girl, for reminding us all. Buoyed by this support, Isla continued to engage with those sharing similar tales and pushed for broader reform. Small businesses in the town rallied together, drafting a charter advocating for fair and inclusive access to community opportunities, eventually leading to real discussions with local authorities. With the blooming of an early spring, Isla grew more resolute in her actions, leading a featured panel at a local town hall meeting subsequent to the viral story. Here, she shared her humble journey and expressed her fervent hope for a town defined not by its luster, but by the kindness that connected its community members. Within weeks, Crystal Peak Ski Resort emerged with revamped protocols, introducing inclusivity initiatives assuring that their facilities and services catered to all discerns of society. They announced more affordable skiing packages specifically for locals whose means had restricted their access to the resort's esteemed slopes. An unexpected boon unfolded as other, simple, patrons stepped forward, emboldened by Isla's tenacity, sharing anecdotes of fleeting snubs or underappreciated visits in opulent establishments not just at the resort, but at popular restaurants and clubs as well. This collective bravery shifted the dialogue from singular incidents to shared experiences, challenging institutions to reevaluate their decorum and hospitality. Though thrust inadvertently into the public eye, Isla chose to remain grounded, her purpose clear and her head effortlessly level above the noise. The flurry of change she had ignited was filtered through her intentionality, not fame or resentment. The resort, now in reparative spirit, reached out directly to Isla, extending a heartfelt apology that bore more sincerity and promise than their earlier corporate statements. Perhaps, they mused, they could transform their missteps into genuine growth. And Isla, after a meaningful reflection, accepted their words with grace, not because she forgot, but because new growth was precisely the direction she hoped they'd pursue. It was a profound evolution. The world she once felt marginalized by now provided her a clearer role, a beacon of activism by choice rather than circumstance. Her courage not only helped transform a local powerhouse institution but also reignited a community's commitment to fairness and inclusivity. The actions she took, however small they initially seemed, proved potent enough to leave an indelible mark, proving true to her father's wisdom, that dignity was the firmest step along any journey. A few weeks later, life in Isla's quiet part of town felt both vastly different and surprisingly the same. She picked up her shifts at the supermarket again, the routine grounding her in ways she welcomed after the whirlwind weeks following the incident at the Crystal Peak Ski Resort. Her stride across the familiar aisles was more confident, buoyed by an internal shift that had brought her closer to realizing her worth. Her reputation had transformed along with her input at work. Colleagues respected her determination and often sought her opinion more, the woman who dared to speak up, on behalf of herself and by extension, many others without that privilege. Though she wore the same sensible thrift attire, each piece carried a badge of pride rather than self-effacement. She stood taller, gently correcting anyone who dismissed her contribution because of outward appearances. One brisk morning, with sunlight streaming through the windows of the supermarket like golden threads, Isla found something unexpected in her locker, a hand-addressed envelope from the town's fire safety department. The stationery carried soothing weight, and inside was a letter of gratitude praising her vigilance and contribution. Not only for spotting a danger before it escalated but for setting into motion safety evaluations throughout town, where other neglected hazards lay dormant until now. The letter ended with an expression that read, "Thank you for choosing safety first," a reminder of how her actions carried significant weight. Buoyed by this unexpected acknowledgement, Isla returned to her duties with renewed vigor, feeling a part of something larger than herself, the town's protector in both spirit and deed. As she returned home that evening, the quiet of her small apartment invited contemplation. She poured herself a cup of tea, resting in the gentle solitude, and found an email brightening her computer screen from a local journalist. The email was an invitation to speak at a community event, a discussion panel focusing on fairness in social spaces and on encouraging those with humble origins to step boldly into spaces usually designed to exclude them. It was an offer prefaced with respect and admiration for her brave disclosure, requesting her as a speaker whose story now inspired more than just a town, but a movement. Sipping her tea thoughtfully, Isla reflected on attending such an event. It was not applause she sought but the chance to build from her experience, to create real, lasting change, a commitment to outreach that empowered all walks of life. The thought of echoing her father's resilience in motivating others filled her with purpose, a beacon to guide her continued journey. The resort, not one to miss an opportunity to continue its road to redemption, reached out to Isla once more with a request for her presence at a small ceremony to inaugurate their newly introduced, all-inclusive ski pass, for locals. The invitation was accompanied by a sincere letter of apology from the management team, outlining all the changes wrought in their policy specific to inclusion and safety standards. They now called their space open and welcoming to everyone, and they thanked Isla for being a catalyst for betterment. Isla pondered it, weighing the sincerity threaded through their words. Inscribed was accountability, a tenet often shielded by wealth and prestige, now unveiled under her unyielding gaze. Accepting, declining, or attending, all were valid choices, but attending held the promise of witnessing firsthand the ripples of change her act had ushered. The world, she realized, was crafted not only by grand gestures but by the quiet revolutions of those who dared to dream aloud. She wrote back to the resort, grace guiding her words, a measured acceptance to their invitation with a broader hope for sustained inclusivity beyond her singular story. As weeks went by, the community grew visibly more inclusive, symbols of change subtly emblazoned in town squares and in town hall discussions. The previously hidden voices, scored at the fringes, rediscovered their footholds in conversations both local and afar, whispering truths that bloomed into rallied hearts, emboldened narratives. One serene afternoon claimed by the past's lingering chill, Isla found herself at the resort's entrance again. A modest gathering awaited, new faces much like hers now mingling comfortably with those who shone with previously tasked privilege. She stood amidst this gathering, exchanging smiles that spoke louder than words of the efforts made towards unison, a unity she had helped forge through her reluctance to back down. Isla, her head held high, took a moment to admire the scene, seeing either end of the community forging past perceived barriers and curated appearances. Her heart swelled as she reflected, these changes were not simply thrust upon her, she had molded them with every action, carved them from the brisk cold of rejection towards the warmth of acceptance. Later, as she retired for the evening, surrounded by close friends sharing laughter, she felt the retreat of a burden bore alone for too long. Their joyous voices carried freshness of rebirth, the sound of a journey matured towards promise rather than obstacle hummed in harmony. Isla watched the evening wear on, nestled in contentment, knowing that though she did not possess the world's spotlight, her courage had enriched the space she resided within. Her story, simple yet potent, had embraced the pulse of progress that resonated in her surroundings. She bore a quiet strength and felt its authenticity sweep over her, a reassuring reminder that dignity combined with courage could indeed cultivate transforming tides in even the smallest of communities. The final glow of contentment, a soft warmth in her heart, wrapped around her like an old but valued coat. She savored the peace that accompanied the meaningful strides she had forged, a testament to courage nurtured from seeds of dignity, sufficient not just for her, but for all who now walked beside her.